Welcome, everybody. It's time to start cruising into a better financial future with your host, Kim Cruz. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cruising into a Better Financial Future with your host, Kim Cruz.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. Yes, I am Kim Cruz. I am a wife, a mom, a daughter, a sister, a friend, an entrepreneur, and a business owner of Cruz Credit Consulting, but not necessarily in that order. I do have over 30 years experience in corporate America and a passion for helping people succeed in all areas of life. I am joined by my good friend Adam Strum. He is the brains behind this production. He is a former corporate executive, the owner of Financial Rescuers, and co-owner of U.S. Financial Alliance, and a 20-year veteran of helping people get out of debt and improve their financial health. Together, we review our listeners' financial problems and address them with our experience, tips, tricks, and resources of network referrals to help you cruise into a better financial future.
I don't know how you do that every week, Kim, but thank you for the introduction. I'm Adam Strum, owner of Financial Rescuers, On Target Strategies, and co-owner of U.S. Financial Alliance. We are honored to have a very special guest with us today on a topic we don't normally touch on, senior finances
Mhm.
and senior living. There gets to a point in almost everyone's life when they're unable to live on their own. And our guest it helps people transition from living on their own to assisted living, senior living, and just have a better life in their golden years. Samantha, I'm not going to use your last name. I'm just going to call you Samantha D, if that's
That's
okay.
fine.
Uh,
Hello.
Samantha D is the community relations director for two Oregon centers of this type. One is Meadow Creek, and the other is, please tell us the name. I can't read my own
Jeff
handwriting.
Jefferson Lodge Memory.
Jefferson Lodge. Both are in Oregon, Salem, just around the Salem, Oregon area. And
Mhm.
both are part of Cascade Living, which is a large network in 5 states, if I'm not mistaken, of senior living facilities.
Yeah.
Samantha, we're so excited to have you here. This is definitely a topic I need to know about. And I know that most of my friends also need to start preparing for this. So
Well, I'm only 12, so it doesn't concern me yet, but one day maybe. Um,
Someday.
so, Samantha, tell us what it's like working with seniors all day, every day.
The funny thing is, I don't generally work with the seniors. I work with families. And that's where my passion comes from because my mother had dementia for 7 years
Ooh.
and I kept her at home not knowing what I was doing. I had no idea what dementia was. When I was growing up, it was called senility or hardening of the arteries. And people, you picture nursing homes where, back when my grandparents went to a nursing home, that's not where you want to put your loved ones. So, to start with, we never use the word facility because you don't want to live in a facility and neither does your mother. But we have beautiful communities that they become a resident in, whether it's memory care or assisted living or independent living. They get to live in their own apartment. They get to be in charge of their own lives. It's not a facility, it's a community. And I learned an awful lot while my mom had dementia. I learned mostly what not to do. And I
I'm
had,
in that same boat, by the way. I took care of my mom with dementia for 2 years, and I created my own senior living. I think I told you about it. In fact, we wired her apartment with cams so we could check on her. We didn't live more than 200 yards away, so we could get there instantly, pretty much, in case of emergency. It's so important that
yeah,
they have their independence because when you take that away, depression sets in.
mhm.
that's the truth. So the thing that I'm seeing now is families who were planning on having mom and dad come live with them can no longer do that because their kids are home from college or doing at home schooling. So the whole plan to have mom and dad move back and live with us, we created a little area for them. isn't working out so much anymore because kids are home, there's no room for mom and dad. Or if mom and dad are currently living with you, you go from being the daughter or the son to being the caregiver. And that's tough. That's a tough transition to make. There is no woman or man in the world that wakes up and thinks, oh man, I hope somebody I don't know gets me undressed and showers me this morning. So think about that community that, you know, they're getting to know the caregivers, and the families can go back to being the daughter, the son, the niece, nephew, whatever the case may be.
Right. It's a very hard transition for any parent to relinquish authority to their son or daughter. They were the authority for 40, 50, 60 years. And now all of a sudden the roles have reversed, and the child has to
Mhm.
be the authority. And it's very hard to make that flip flop or that transition. Now, the big thing you just mentioned, and the reason we have you on as a guest today, is how this relates to finances and credit.
Mhm.
There are several methods, and I visited the websites for Cascade and for Meadowbrook. I didn't know about Jefferson Lodge, so I apologize. I did my homework. I do my homework for every guest who comes on. And you have a beautiful facility. I did the tour, the video
Mhm.
tour.
We
I
have a
looked at it.
beautiful community. That's the
All right, all right,
F
all right. I
word.
used the wrong word, and I might have even done it on purpose so you could correct me. But still, the fact of the matter is the community is gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's well kept, it's well maintained,
Mhm.
and I do believe that if more senior communities slash, because in some states, as you well know, they are unfortunately facilities, were to take more of the model that Cascade seems to use, it would probably be an easier transition for people. But then the hard part is, how do you afford it?
Right, right.
And I know you've been working with a family recently on this.
I work with a lot of families on a daily basis. And so what ends up happening is mom and dad have worked really, really hard their whole lives, and they've saved and they've got all this money in savings. Now what? Now
Mhm.
we need living. So we try to work with the families and see what resources are available. Insurance, unless it's long-term care, regular insurance does not pay for senior living. It will pay for your medications while you're in the community, but it won't pay for what we call the room and board. So that becomes either a private pay or a Medicaid issue.
There are very
Private
few people
pay.
who can afford to pay private pay for that. Because when I looked up online, I did, like I said, I do my homework for these things. It can cost as much as $1,000 a day in some
Well,
communities, not yours, but in some
yes.
communities, it can run upwards of $1,000 a day to be in these communities,
Mhm.
especially if you need a high level of care.
Right.
And I think what you just said, Adam,
Yeah.
is what most people think of right off the bat. So that's exactly why we're offering this information, because I think all of us are probably in that same age group where we need to start planning and we need to know our options. So that's what I would think right off the bat. Oh my God, $1,000 a day. What are we going to do?
Oh boy, Kim caught me. I'm not 12. I'm actually 22. All right. So Samantha, tell us a little bit about more with the financing. How do people manage? Like you said, they have all the savings. It can disappear very, very quickly if you have to self-pay.
It can disappear very quickly. One thing I encourage families to do, every family, is look at veterans benefits. Many, many families have veterans benefits, but they don't know about it. I work with a group called Patriot Angels. It's nationwide. And if you have been in the military, say you were a spouse married to a spouse that were both veterans, you know, you can sometimes get up to $3,000 in assisted living or memory care reimbursement. So it's a great way. Not everybody qualifies, of course, but it is a great way. It's a first step I tell people to take. Um, when I'm talking to children who are looking to move their parents in, I always recommend, before you start the process, really try to get a POA, power of attorney, so you can sign financial documents for your mom and dad, that kind of stuff is all taken care of. It's very almost, unless you go for guardianship, it's almost impossible to get POA after a diagnosis of dementia.
Sure. Power of attorney is, I'm going to state this early in the show. I usually state it near the end. Nothing that any of us are giving is legal advice today. This is all advice from professionals who work in the field, but should not be misconstrued as legal advice. For legal advice, we suggest you see a licensed attorney in your state. Now, that being said, I work with a lot of powers of attorney. In fact, Sam, you signed a power of attorney for my company to do work for you. So I understand POAs, and I understand them in relation, as my mother passed away 5 years ago after I was her caregiver for almost 5 years in total, 2 years living in my apartment complex with me, where I created my own because I just didn't like any place I looked at, any of the communities out here. And you have adjusted my word, and I will not use the F word again, I promise. But looking at the communities out here, they just weren't suitable for her needs. And so we cared for her ourselves, and it was incredibly difficult. I don't recommend it. I recommend visitation often, though, because seniors tend to get depressed at a much higher rate than everybody else. Financially speaking, though, it is imperative, I'm sure you will agree, and I'm going to have you speak on it, imperative that in your 50s at the latest, possibly sooner if you can, you look into long-term care insurance.
Long-term care insurance can make a very, very big difference. Most of the people going into senior care right now have some sort of long-term care plan in place, and they're amazing. Those older long-term care plans, I wouldn't have known if my mom had one. So make sure that you're doing your research, finding out if your parents have one. They can pay the full amount. If you are getting a long-term care policy now, I highly recommend you shop around, because they're not as wonderful as they used to be. And there's a big waiting window. So sometimes you have to have like a 90-day stay before they will even start to kick in. So you're responsible for that portion up front.
Right. And the best regular insurance can do is maybe pay for 30 days of it as rehab or another. They have to have a medical code in order to get it paid for. All right. So before we go into any more of this, we're going to go into more of this at the end. Let's throw out our news article of the week. Pertaining to credit and debt, this week's news is, according to creditcards.com and the American Banking Association, for the first time in over 12 years, more than 30% of people are carrying no balances on their credit card accounts. I believe it's due to fear of the economy and the fact that it is subject to crashing at any moment. But people are afraid to carry balances on their credit cards. More people have paid balances to zero every month than in the last 50 years, as far as month to month. Kim, your thoughts?
Well, there's so many things that go into that. As we've talked every week, that there is a tightrope that you're walking with credit. Do you pay it off and take it to a zero balance? Do you carry a small balance? What's going on? And finances are all in a disarray with what's going on right now in personal finances, not economy, personal finances. And I think you're right. People are worried about how they are going to pay their bills come 2 months, 3 months, 4 months down the road, because everything is so uncertain. However, we talked last week about a lot of lenders, when you're not using your accounts, they're closing them without telling the lenders that they're going to close their accounts. So it's, like I said, it's definitely a tightrope that you're on, because you do want to show that you're using them, as well as to keep your score maintained, that you're a responsible borrower. So there's a lot of facets that go into this whole
Sure,
thing.
it is a tightrope, no doubt about it. Sam, do you have an opinion on this?
I'm actually surprised to hear that most people are paying it off, because I would think that people would be trying to keep their money in their pocket and then, credit be damned if the world falls apart. So it surprises me to hear that people are paying it off.
Yep, I was a little surprised too, but then I realized, okay, if 30% are paying their balances to zero, And that's a high rate for paying your balance to zero. The normal rate is between 18 and 23% of cardholders. But then you have to realize that's less than a third, 30%. What about the other 2/3? And I have a feeling that what you just said, Samantha, is exactly spot on. I think the other 2/3 are currently thinking to themselves, credit be damned. We need to pay our bills and rent, and we're going to use our credit cards and or cash advances from those cards to
Mhm.
survive because there's no work out there to be found, and it's just a completely crushed economy right now. And last week, Kim and I touched on economy versus finance, which is two completely different animals. Finances can be wonderful while the economy is crumbling, and vice versa. You can
Mhm.
be doing really well. Jeff Bezos, in the past 10 months, made an extra $3 billion, while the rest of us worried about paying our rent or mortgage. So, one doesn't necessarily mean the other falls with it. That being said, it doesn't shock me, though, that the people that have the means are trying not to carry a balance. The people who have the means don't understand credit that well in general, believe it or not. They tend to understand it even less than the person struggling. For instance, Samantha, you got an education while you were with my company and in my program about credit and how it works. And you understand it better, I think, than you ever did before, uh, going through the settlement negotiation and other processes.
Yep.
That that I educate every client that way. I spoke to a friend of yours in Connecticut yesterday just about the same type of thing, and to me, it just means that those with the means are just saying, "Oh, I don't want to carry any balance in case the market plummets and I lose my
Mhm.
money." But in reality, they'd be better off carrying a small balance. The more you show usage, the more the bank wants to keep you at the level you're at, keep your credit limits high. We found out last week in last week's news article that they're arbitrarily, it doesn't matter what your score is, lowering credit limits on almost everybody's accounts in
Mhm.
order to hedge themselves. So that's my 2 cents. I always put my 2 cents in. Sometimes I take it back, sometimes I leave it there. All right, so we're going to go to the mailbag, and we have some incredible questions for our expert who is with us
All
today.
right.
We do.
Kim,
Yep.
would you like to send out the first question?
I will. I'm going to tell you what Mitch from Ohio was asking. He asks, my dad is 74 and needs specialized care Medicaid. Well, he needs specialized care. Medicaid only covers 80%. Are there any ways to afford having him in, he used the F word, facility,
Well,
but
I have to cut and paste what's in the email. So um, let's say in a
Okay.
community, and I think he meant Medicare, not Medicaid, but that's just my opinion because Medicaid is a
So,
different program. It's not a senior program.
yep, you're right.
yep. So Medicaid will help pay for room and board. Medicare pays for, insurance and doctors and things like that. It's different in every state. And I don't know, obviously, I'm not sure about Ohio. My biggest thing is shop around. You have to call different communities to find out who will waive the community fee. Everybody has most communities have a $1,000 to $5,000 community fee just to move in.
Wow.
And will that be, could you waive that community fee so we don't have to pay that? You can ask what their pricing is, and you want to know everything. You'll get buildings that'll tell you that it's all inclusive. So your mom will pay $3,500 a month. It's all inclusive. And then you get a bill for $75 because she refused her meds, or $25 because she refused a shower. Or, you get a litany of what I like to call a la carte pricing. And you want to make sure that those communities that you're looking at, so when you get a monthly statement and you're expecting it to be 3,500, it's not 42 or 4,500. And during COVID times, are they charging you to bring meals to their room? There can be as much as a $5 or $10 charge, even though the dining rooms are closed due to COVID. Communities can charge. We don't, but I have heard of communities charging $5 a tray for room delivery because it takes more time and things like that. You have to shop around. That's the the biggest thing I can tell people. Prices are pretty close. You know, we do what we call a competitive analysis. So we talk to all of our friends and we find out what the industry is doing in our area. So we all stay really, really close in price, but people are willing to work with you for sure if mom and dad are looking at your community.
So what I heard in that, because I'm skeptical and you know me, what I heard is beware of hidden fees. We
Yeah,
call them gotcha fees, and they appear in
gotcha.
almost every industry. These gotcha fees, it's all inclusive except for these 3,000 things.
But we didn't tell you about that. So we're going to charge you for that. You know, things like, is toilet paper included? What do I have to bring if my mom is in assisted living? Is she allowed to have food in her room? What is she allowed to cook? Do we have to pay for snacks? What is, people need to ask all the proper questions. And I think sometimes when people Google on the internet, they'll say, you know, one of the major questions is, what is your staff turnover? Well, in most cases, it's pretty high. That's not necessarily an indicator of the care in the community. I always tell people to ask, how long has your management been in place? How long has your executive director been here? Why are you at this community? What did your community do for you and your other employees during COVID? Those are great questions to ask to see how the upper management, like, you know, the corporate offices actually run.
I love those questions, and it gives you a better understanding of what's going on in that community rather than what just reading what you see on a website. Um, I love ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can possibly think of, as little as the toilet paper. Who pays for the toilet paper? So
If they can get toilet paper.
yeah, true.
Well, we've already
Life is too
answered.
short for life is too short for bad toilet paper. So always ask.
Cottonelle it is. So we've answered question 2, but let's just touch on it briefly again. Dana from South Dakota asked, how much does senior living cost generally, and does insurance cover it? And we've already answered this in the early segment, but just to reiterate, you know, senior living is not inexpensive. It's actually more expensive than living on one's own, but that's because you get so many amenities that come with it, including care, including interaction, including meals in some cases or most cases, and including all maintenance at the same time, especially if they have their own apartments, like you said you do at the community that you manage. So let's just quickly touch on it again. The cost, if it has to be out of pocket, if you don't have that long-term insurance or you don't have Medicare, Medicaid combo, which is possibly the best thing a senior can have in today's day and age, plus, of course, a Medicaid Advantage plan on top of that combo, which gives you even more benefits. People are afraid of these Advantage plans, but these Advantage plans save people's lives.
So senior living is broken down into 3 categories, maybe 4. If you do independent living, assisted living, memory care, and also skilled nursing. So it can run anywhere from $2,500 a month for just independent living, where you're just getting the apartment, and that would include your electricity and your water and garbage and things like that, maybe 2 meals a day. It can run up to $10,000
A month.
a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it can
And that's
crush
for
you.
if you're, yeah, it's really, it's a need driven industry. There's a lot of seniors out there and they fall and they break a hip and they can't stay at the hospital. So then they go to a skilled nursing where insurance will pick up after a while and they can stay there until they, you know, insurance makes sure that they're hitting a baseline and ready to be discharged, but they're not safe to go home. So now is it, do you want assisted living or memory care? So you have to work with the families to find out exactly what's appropriate for the resident.
I hear you. I hear
Mhm.
you. This is great information. Kim, you want to hit question 3?
I will. Yep. Question 3 is Marion from Georgia. My mom and dad are both getting to the point of needing to live in a senior facility. They have saved all their lives Will this cause them to lose everything? And I've heard stories about mom and dad can't have any assets if we're going to put them in this facility. So yes, definitely, please explain.
So if I were to address this question, I would like to know a little bit more about lose everything. What does that mean? Um, if they're going to be applying for government aid, I know that there's guidelines for every different state, and I can speak maybe a little bit more to Oregon, where I can tell you that you have to get down to $2,000. You can't have assets, a home or car. You have to, if they look back 7 years, I believe, and see what you've done with that money. Have you given all of your grandchildren a grand cruise or gifted $10,000? You know, there's certain things that you can use your money for to prepay, you know, burial and funeral expenses. But by the time somebody gets down to $2,000, think about $2,000 and how little that actually is in order to have that. So if you're talking about losing everything, it's just hard to understand if they mean in order to get in or once they get in. So in order to get in and you're on memory or state aid, you have to get down to pretty little. If you're moving into a community, they don't have to sell their home. If they're in assisted living and they want to go home every once in a while, you know, back to their house to get stuff, and they're just coming to assisted living to have some help with their medications and have an extra set of eyes, make sure they're eating and taking their meds properly, they won't lose everything.
Thank you. That's a really good answer. Because I've personally experienced, like I said, I was a caregiver, not just for my mom, but I was a caregiver for over a year, way, way, way back. You know, back when I rode a Stegosaurus to school. Um, the fact of the matter is, I agree with what you said, and you're the expert, no doubt, because you got it spot on from what I've seen and experienced in my days working with senior care communities and facilities. And I do know what the difference is. And if it's okay, I'm going to try to portray the difference so that we stop worrying about the words. Most rehab or skilled nursing are facilities. They're like hospitals, but miniaturized in a way. You do get a little bit more privacy than you would in a regular hospital. That's a facility. What Samantha works at is more of a community. There are independent apartments. There is probably somewhere on the property, if someone is ill, a place that is a quote mini facility in the community. But that's the main differential between the two. One is more of a medical feel, and the other is more of a home feel. And you can be at home in the community, or you can be treated in the facility. And that's the difference between the two. Does that make sense? Am I hitting that right?
You are. It sounds right. And what I like to tell families is we want to get your family safe before we get to the skilled nursing. Well, what does it mean when you're ready? You know, how do I know, mom? Well, what does ready look like to you? Is it after they fall and break a hip and you've got to go through the hospital and then the bills for that and then into a skilled, or do you want to avoid that whole middle step right there and let's get them settled into assisted living or memory care before they get injured?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And as you said, people don't realize you don't have to give up your outside life to be part of assisted living. It is an extra expense, which may or may not be a big expense depending on the type of insurance and type of coverage you have. Of course, if you're on state and government sponsored insurance, well, it's going to be rough to keep both your outside and inside lives. But I know a lot of seniors who have apartments in assisted living communities where they are
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. And then a week before a major holiday, they'll go home, dress up the house, clean up, have the whole family over, and a week later, they're back at the assisted living apartment. So, you know, it's all a matter of, it's like we all have work-life balances. Seniors don't have work anymore. So what they have is a life balance. They have their life, and then they have their life with their family because they are patriarchs and matriarchs of family most of the time. Grandma rules with an iron fist. Grandpa says X, you do X. they're the ones that they're the authorities because they've lived through everything. God bless them. And as long as they are not a memory care patient, the odds are they're imparting wisdom, not even knowing it most of the time, just by what they're doing. I learned a
Sometimes, Adam, in assisted living, we find that if mom needs care, dad will come too, because he'll say to her, it's about me. I need some help taking care of you, but I'm going to come with you.
Mhm.
And then he's settled and all of that, he can maybe go home for a couple of nights, and or he can still have his workshop to go home, but know that there's an extra set of eyes on the person that he loves most in the world, and he can leave and rest assured that she's going to be taken care of while he's gone, maybe for a couple of days.
Exactly. And
And
that's
I,
something anyone who hasn't, Kim, I'll give the floor to you. I'm going to shut up in just a moment. Something most caregivers don't understand going into it for the first time is it is an all encompassing job to caregive for a senior, especially if they have any type of mental problem or any type of physical problem that is not controlled. Um, that could be colitis. It could be, any type of physical problem that can flare up at any given time. Your entire life has to be put on hold to go caregive. And not everybody has a lifestyle where they can just turn off their job and their kids and their wife and their bills and everything else to run and take someone to a hospital for 2 days and have to be at their side to make sure that medications aren't misgiven. It happened to my mom where she went in for she fell and bumped her head, and the doctor sent her to the hospital to have an MRI because that was the easiest way with her insurance, was through the hospital. Well, they had to keep her overnight because there was a lineup for MRIs. In the interim, I left them with everything. A list of medications she was allergic to, my number, my contact information. My phone never leaves my side ever, even when I'm taping a show. So, I did everything that a caregiver's supposed to do right. Then I left to go get 3 hours, 4 hours of sleep before morning when they were going to give her the MRI. Well, there are blood tests that they automatically take of every patient who's admitted, came back with a slight GTI, UTI, I'm sorry, UTI. And they gave her an antibiotic she was allergic to. She ended up in ICU on a breathing tube for 4 days. So caregiving can be just all, and if you can't get that 1, 2, 3, 4 day break every now and then, you might literally go insane. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's 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 like caring for a brand new newborn all on your own and not having a phone to call a doctor if something goes wrong.
Mhm.
It can be very stressful. It can be all encompassing. And I can't put it any more vividly
And
than
it's very different. It's different for every family. You know, you would never leave your newborn through maybe 7 or 8 year old home alone, but sometimes you might have to leave your mom home alone, and I can speak from experience. We had smoke detectors in every room. We had fire extinguishers on every floor, multiple ones, because there was many fires that were set in my house, not intentionally, but there's a lot of that goes into caregiving. And that's why I'm such an advocate of assisted living and memory care, because it lets you go back to being a family again. And there are ways to do it. If anybody has any reservations about the community that they're putting their loved one in, that can be gotten rid of with some really in-depth research. It's your job to research where you would send your kindergartner, your preschooler, and your mom.
and it's very different. Go ahead, Kim. All yours.
It's all about options. And I know that for many families, this isn't a conversation that you want to have, but it's a needed conversation. And I think it puts everybody, or gives everybody, peace of mind when you have this conversation and you know what their wishes are. And when the independent living is explained properly, it could be a whole better way of living than living by yourself in your home. I'm in a situation where my husband's grandmother is 108 years old. She is she's still living in the home that she raised her family in in South Central LA. She's comfortable there. She has all her faculties. She has her granddaughter that lives with her just to have somebody in the house with her. But you have to have the conversation with her with, what are your wishes? What do you want? We don't know how much longer we're going to have her, but I think it puts everybody at ease when you know that those wishes can be carried out. And her children, my father-in-law, they're in their 80s now as well. So we have two
Two
generations.
generations in need of this type of care.
Right, right.
And it
So
could be that the children are actually more incapable than the parent.
we're fortunate that they are still capable, but you have that situation where people are living longer and they have different needs, and we need to explain the different options. So this is very, very needed information for people to know that you have options, that there's not just a facility to put them in. There are different communities depending on what their needs are.
And different
So
levels of care. Yeah.
exactly. Yep. So Adam, you want to take the next question? I think we have a couple of more questions.
Yeah, there's 2 questions left, and we still have about 20 minutes in the episode, give or take.
Okay.
This next question is geared more to you and me, Kim. So let me put it out exactly as it's written.
Yep.
We have Jason in Florida. Do seniors need to worry about credit if they're going to outlive the debt? Now, this is a question about seniors that got grabbed, and because that was one of the search methods of the email I looked for was questions about seniors. This one doesn't really involve senior living, but it does involve senior debt. And more seniors than ever before in the history of America are carrying a ton of debt into their retirement. This is what I helped Samantha and her husband clear out so that they could look forward. And I believe they bought a new house right after the program ended. And luckily, she's been able to be there for, even though she does have this taxing job, she's been there for her daughter, who's going through a little bit of a tumultuous time at the moment. The fact is we have something in the credit industry called becoming judgment proof. And I want to explain this, and I want to preface it by saying it is not me saying you should commit any type of fraud. It's just about putting your mind at ease. It's not about not paying your bills or not paying your creditors. I would never, it's against the law to advise someone to not pay their bills unless there's, some reason like you're filing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So I'm not saying not to pay your bills, but to put your mind at ease. If you're over the age of 65 and you're living on a government check, be it Social Security, a pension check, some sort of income that you're not out working for and earning every week, those are non-garnishable in all 50 states by federal law. You cannot garnish Social Security income unless you are the IRS or enforcement for child support or alimony. Those are the only things allowed to garnish Social Security monies. You cannot even touch the bank account of someone whose bank account receives Social Security monies or pension monies. So that being said, you become what's called judgment proof. If for some reason mom who's 74 needs memory care but isn't getting it, her kids live too far away, no one has realized that mom forgets things, and she doesn't pay her bills, what ends up happening is the creditor will eventually collect on it, try to collect on it, give up, sue mom for that bill, get a judgment against mom for that bill, and go to garnish her or levy her bank account. But because mom is receiving funds that are not allowed to be garnished, she is quote unquote judgment proof. The judgment is meaningless. They will not be allowed to touch the funds. The banks are forced to adhere to the fact they look at where the deposits come from into that account. And if they come from a government source or from a pension, they will not allow a creditor, even with a judgment, to touch the funds. So
I find that very, very interesting. My parents, they had very little money and lots of debt, and they did file bankruptcy. And had we known that, that probably would have been a good thing to know at the time, 10 years ago.
Exactly. It's very rare. And we're going to have a bankruptcy attorney who Samantha's been privileged to speak to in the past, attorney George Tedros. He's coming on the show in a couple of weeks in
Mm-hmm.
February, and he's going to talk more about bankruptcy. He doesn't recommend bankruptcy for people over 65 because of this judgment proof window. He recommends debt negotiation through a company that's, above board or a licensed attorney, because it's easier to budget that way than it is through a bankruptcy. And most seniors, well, not most, I wouldn't say that. That's actually a misstatement, but many seniors have assets that don't allow for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. A lot of seniors own a home, or they have two
Mm-hmm.
cars, one for husband, one for wife. This is stuff they earned, while earning their years, but it becomes impossible for them to file for a Chapter 7 because they have too much assets or too much income from the dual Social Security checks to qualify for a Chapter 7, and they end up in a Chapter 13. And we have discussed at length in 2 different episodes why a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is rarely, very rarely, a good idea. In fact,
Yes.
what we found was there's only one real scenario where it's a good idea, and that is if you're about to lose your home,
Mm-hmm.
because then the court will restructure your mortgage through Chapter 13 bankruptcy, allowing you not to lose your home if it's possible, if you can afford what the court orders you to pay. And that's the only time we found that a Chapter 13 was worth the amount of time, money, and mental anguish of going through. That being said, I think we've answered this question in detail, and I refer you back, and I'll put in the comments below a link to our bankruptcy episode. You should really watch the bankruptcy episode we did, and the follow up coming up with attorney George Tedros, a licensed bankruptcy attorney, will be in about 3 or 4 weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
look forward and come view us when we have him on. Throw out that final question, Kim.
Yep. The final question we pretty much covered as well, but Robert in Maryland, are seniors responsible for other expenses or out of pocket expenses when living in a senior community? So they may be responsible for that toilet paper, right?
It depends on the community. That's something you would have to ask about. Is transportation included? Do they take mom and dad to the doctor? Do they send a staff member with mom to be at the doctor with her? There's so many questions to ask. Most independent living and assisted living, they're responsible for out-of-pocket things. Toilet paper, paper towels, things for their kitchen. When they move in to a community, most things are not provided. Furniture, sometimes you'll get lucky and there's a place, we furnish everything, but most places, families will move in the loved one's belongings. So it looks like home. We want them to feel like they're, comfortable and familiar with all the things that are around them.
Right. They'll bring their stuff with them if they can.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but out-of-pocket expenses is pretty common unless it's a full memory care community where the resident is safe inside. They're not going to be able to get out the doors on their own. And those are generally everything's covered.
Well, that being said, I can't thank you enough for all the insight today. It really is important that people understand that get your financial house in order before you turn 50, because you want 50 to 60 to be your transition time, and 60 plus to be a time where finances are not the number one concern in your head. When you're 20 and 30 and just getting married and just starting out, finances is all you can think about. In fact, it's one of the number one causes of divorce, are arguments about money. So, it's very simple on the time chart. In your 20s and 30s, you're going to worry about money. In your 30s and 40s, you're going to worry a little less about money, but you're going to worry about paying things off and being out from underneath. In your 50s, you want to do your preparation. You want to put together a living will. You want to make sure you have the right types of insurance in place. Like Samantha said earlier, there's a long wait sometimes for your long-term care insurance to kick in, and they do that to prevent people from signing up for long-term care 2 days before they need it. At that, otherwise insurance companies are going to lose so much money that they won't be able to stay in business. And you have to look at it from both sides of the street. The reason why it's so expensive to run a senior care community is there's a lot of expense that goes into it. When someone has to accompany a senior to a doctor's appointment and drive the minibus that takes them there, that's an all-day event, and they have to make more than minimum wage to do that, or they're not going to bother doing it. It's specialized care. So, they have to cover that expense of $20 an hour that this person is giving to just one patient, just one senior, just one person. It's expensive to run a senior care facility. People will rant and rave, why is it costing me $8,000 a month to keep mom in this community? Well, try taking her home and doing it yourself. And believe me, the 8,000 won't seem so outrageous anymore. I've been in both shoes. I've worked in a community and I've cared for someone on my own because I couldn't find a good community. So I actually am speaking from experience here. Don't get so upset at the high cost. It's something that you can't put a price on, is proper care and decency. And unfortunately, as you know, Samantha, in the industry that you're in, there are plenty of places, and if I'm not mistaken, you left one just over the fact that you didn't like the way that they treated people.
Yeah, I left too,
I'm not
actually.
naming names because I don't want any
I'm not
legalities
naming names
involved.
either.
But
I'm not
but
naming
you've
names
left
either, but
you've left a couple
you
of
have,
different communities because they didn't properly treat their clientele. And that's not a myth, it's not a fable, and it's why you need to do your research, do your due diligence, do your homework, and make sure that where mom, dad, uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa are going to live is a place where they're going to feel safe and comfortable and
Exactly.
get the help they need when they need it.
and that's a kind of a difficult conversation to have now too, because senior living is still desperately needed. And families are being separated because they're not allowed in during COVID. So, how do you move your mom into a community where it's memory care? You're only going to see her through a window or, an outside visit, or if they get COVID, then,
Not at all.
you're not going to see them at all. How do you figure these things out? You have to have faith in the people that you talk to about their communities. I, as just a human, I something that I don't believe in. So that's why I'm so happy here. They walk the walk. They say they do what they're going to say they're going to do. And you have to build a relationship with the families, and the families become my passion because my mom, like I said, had Alzheimer's, and you have to, I want to know the families and get to love them. I have my mom's last words, I don't know how to show you, tattooed on my arm. And it says, I want to stop remembering things. Let's see.
Yep, I see it there.
Because it was the last words she ever wrote. I never saw them until after she passed, but people are scared of going into an assisted living or a memory care. Scared because they're not remembering. More than anything, I highly encourage people, if you have questions, reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. They're amazing. Their phones are answered 24 hours.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Just a
There
little
you go,
hiccup.
you're
There
back.
you go.
You were saying
talking
that they
about
answer their
calling
phone
the
24 hours a day at the Alzheimer's hotline.
The
And
Alzheimer's Association.
yep, they have a hotline that's 24 hours a day. I do know because I've called it for my mom back in the day.
And you get an awful lot of help, and they don't forget about you. They walk it with you, and it's a great resource for people.
And no matter where you live in the United States, I want to put this out as sort of a PSA, a public service announcement. If you're about to take on caregiving for an older relative, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandfather, grandmother, learn what community resources are in your community to help you. Because if you don't have a way to take that day off to clear your head from caregiving, you're not going to be an optimal caregiver. There's no possible way that any one person or even group of 2 or 3 can care for someone, especially if they have memory issues. And my mom did, so I know what you're talking about there. There's no way you can do it 24/7 because unlike caring for a child, a child doesn't know all the things a senior knows. A senior has lived a whole lifetime,
Mhm.
and there are, even in the worst cases of Alzheimer, there are moments of clarity. And those moments of clarity, they want control back because they are the senior. They know more than you do. And they'll grab that control just to 20 seconds later, not remember who you are. And it's devastating. And if you can't take a break from that, all you're doing is ruining your own mental health. So learn the community, all communities everywhere in the US that I know of. I don't know of any community that doesn't have some sort of resource to help caregivers who are trying to care for their relatives outside of communities, because communities either are unaffordable or they can't find one they like, or mom just outright refuses to go to one, or there's lots of different reasons why people caregive at home. And if you're going to take that on, and you laugh because you know that it's an insurmountable task, but the fact is they do it, and they have no choice, unfortunately. In our society, that's just a reality, is that there are people that just don't have the choice until all things are exhausted, including them, and they hit that threshold you mentioned earlier of $2,000 in assets or less. And then the government basically orders this person into a senior care community facility, whichever one it may be, depending on their medical health, not their mental health. Um, that being said, it amazes me that Kim, you mentioned 108. That means that this person lived through two pandemics:
Yep, she sure has.
Spanish
Yep.
flu of 1918 and this
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
Wow. So she
108
can
years
actually
old.
school people on the fact that, yes, everyone was wearing masks in 1918 when they
Oh
walked
yeah.
outside.
Yep.
Because they were. It was a very common thing back in the 1918 Spanish flu that everyone who went outside had a mask on.
Yep.
Um,
It's an
it's
amazing story.
not
108
politics,
years
it's
old.
just medicine.
Mhm.
Uh, that being said, we've had an incredible show. Samantha, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this. It's a topic we don't get to touch on enough, is seniors, and making sure that seniors are okay financially going into what is the next phase of their life. And you helped us get that across to our viewers, and we really appreciate your coming on.
Yes, this
I
has been
really,
absolutely wonderful. I greatly, greatly appreciate you being on.
I'm thankful to you guys for giving me the opportunity. I think that it's hard on my heart watching families suffer with having to put mom or dad into a community and also trying to figure out the resources at the same time. And I can't thank Adam enough. I will never stop preaching how much I love Adam, and he literally saved my hiney and my family, and has continued to do so. So Kim, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to help my extended family in Oregon. I love you guys immensely. I think you know that from the posts and the fact that I follow everything out there. You guys mean a lot to me as well. Samantha was with me for 3 years in a program that took a roller coaster ride all over the place. She experienced every part of a debt relief program there is to experience, from a lawsuit that came in that had her panicked, to having to buy a home right after she nuked her credit, to she went through it all. And she'll tell you, the staff, not me. Let's give thanks to my
No, it
staff as
was
well.
you. It was Adam. It was Adam. I was not an easy client because I'm very emotional.
Inquisitive.
Yeah,
You're
I
very
was.
inquisitive, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But the fact is, my staff is the reason why I have the time to give the way I do. So I want to give a shout out to the staff I have, to John, to Rhonda, to Festus, to Suzanne, my wife, who actually works the front desk for us most of the time. To everyone who's worked on my staff at Financial Rescuers and with the staff at USFA. Isa and I, the two heads of this we couldn't do what we do for our clients without the staff we have. And Samantha, you know that John played a big part in your settlements because you spoke to John. He was the one studying for his bar exam at the time. He is now an
I just say
attorney.
Adam.
Yep, I know, I know. A lot of my clients do that because they come to me and I give of my time, but it's the staff below me that makes me eligible and able to do what I do. And so I appreciate them as much as you appreciate me. And I want to make sure that that's understood. More than that, though, I appreciate the person over there in the next window, who co-hosts with me every week, and we're going to continue to touch on topics that don't just involve debt and credit,
Mhm.
like this
Mhm.
one. We just today found out we're booking a landlord of a 250 apartment complex to come on and talk about rent and being a landlord, which everybody thinks is so great. And why is he coming after me? I'm only 2 days late with my rent. Well, it's because he just got a $38,000 heating bill for your complex, and he
Mhm.
has to pay the darn thing, and your rent is what pays it. And I want people to get a greater understanding for the bill senders, because if you don't understand the bill sender, you're really not understanding why you're buried under the bills you have. You have to look at what they're thinking when they send you the bill, as well as what you're thinking when you say, I don't have the money to pay it. And so we're going to look at that in future episodes. Next week, we have a serial entrepreneur on. Samantha, you
Mhm.
should tune in for this one. You're going to enjoy Angel Cerna. Angel is an amazing guy, serial entrepreneur,
Yep.
opening company after company all over the place. He just loves helping people so much that he keeps opening more companies in different areas to help more people. He's one of the greatest salesmen I've ever known. I had a nice conversation with him in our pre-show. So look forward next week on January 12th to Angel Cerna being on, and we're going
Yep.
to discuss entrepreneurship.
Yep. And I just want to thank you again, Samantha. You exude passion for what you do, and people are fortunate to have you be on their side and help them. So thank you very much for all this information. Adam and I do what we do because we are passionate about helping people as well. That's why we're here, and we help people cruise into a better financial future. So again, thank you, and
That's
we'll
what it's
see you
all
You're
about.
all.
welcome.
So two more things before we sign off. Two more things. First, email your questions about anything financial to questions at cruisingintoabetterfinancialfuture.com. That's cruising with a Z, CRUZIN, into a better financial future.com. The email address that you can email those questions will be in the comments down below this video. In addition to that, I always have something funny to say about a guest that I've invited on. So I'm going to tell you a funny story about Samantha very quickly. My wife and I go on long drives every Friday night. Every Friday night, this is what we do because it's inexpensive, and Arizona is a big state to explore with a lot to see. And so Friday nights, we drive 400 miles in a Friday night just to get the stress out and just have alone time. We don't bring our phones except for emergencies. Well, my phone rang while I was on my Friday night drive, and my wife and I looked at each other and we go, that's Samantha. It's got to be an emergency. And it was about 8:30 at night. So we answered it. And I think she was shocked that I answered. I think she was calling expecting to leave me a voicemail, but we answered it. And it was a financial issue that we have since helped, including me searching out a couple of professionals for you to see in your area who can help you with that issue. And that's just the way it works. And so that's a funny story about Samantha calling me on a Friday night expecting to leave a voicemail and getting me and Suzanne together at the same time because we happened to be on our Friday night drive. And I think once you hung up, you were able to sleep a lot better. At least I hope so.
Adam, I think the funny part of that story is that you answered your phone on a Friday night at 8:30. And I will say, when you open a tax bill from the IRS that says you owe $29,000 in a month, that would cause somebody to panic. And Adam helped me solve that. So
Yep.
again,
She got a good night's sleep. The panic ended. And in fact, since then, not only has the panic ended, but you found out you probably don't have to pay most of that bill.
still $8,000, but it's better than 29.
That's 1/3. I mean, that's less than a third, to be honest. And the IRS will work with you on that too. You don't have to pay it all at once. So that being said, there's your funny story for the week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. I want to let you know privately that me and a few of my friends, we took 2020 out in the middle of the desert and we threw it in a hole, salted it, burned it, and then buried it. So happy 2021, everybody. I'm glad we're in a new year. Let's forget 2020 ever happened and let's cruise into a better financial future together.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for being a part of Cruising into a Better Financial Future. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.